Coming up today here on the Raiders Report, we're going to be looking at 10 players that need to have a solid practice during Raiders training camp. That way, they do not get cut. All 10 of the players that you're about to see here on today's show are roster bubble candidates. Candidates that I can make an argument of why they would make the roster. I can also make a reason of why they wouldn't make the roster. I do have them ranked from 10 down to 1 just of how important it is for that player to go out there and do their thing. For those that do not know, and this is why you should subscribe, the Raiders Report, we're going to be talking about training camp a lot, and I mean a lot leading up into the preseason. Rookies report this Sunday. Veterans, they report on Tuesday, July 23rd. That first preseason game's up against the Minnesota Vikings on August 10th, and I'll tell you what, I cannot wait for that game to end up going down. So these 10 players are on the roster bubble. They could get cut by Telesco and Antonio Pierce. And for the Raiders, you're going to have to make a decision on who makes it, who doesn't, come 4 p.m. Eastern Time, August 27th. And training camp, to me, essentially, as soon as it starts, it's throughout the preseason, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going. I do think it's also important to note that we do get to keep that extra player, 54, and that's going to be David Agoa, the International Pathway Program player. If you haven't subscribed yet, why are you part of this 28%? I want you to help get this to 100%. And I know a lot of people watch this show. And honestly, in the month of July, I got a lot of real ones. But the fact that 28% of the people don't hit that subscribe button, this is how Chugs and I provide for our friends, how we provide for our families. Hell, we do this 100% for free. So if you could, hit that subscribe button, join the 72%, just subscribe, baby. Let's go. We're going to work our way from 10 all the way down to 1. And the first player that we're going to be talking about today is linebacker Amari Burney, who drafted by Dave Ziegler, drafted by Josh McDaniels, and this guy needs to have a solid training camp because I don't think that he is a lock to make the team. There was a report earlier in the month, technically in the month of June, that was talking about Luke Masterson being the linebacker 3. Not Eichenberg, but Masterson. So if I hear that, if I'm Amari Burney, I go, well, they're not going to cut Eichenberg, and you know that Spillane and Divine Diablo, they're going to end up making the roster. I do think that Burney's going to be a solid player on special teams because of that athletic ability, but then also he needs to step up because of the relationship Darian Butler has with Antonio Pierce, with Marvin Lewis, and I don't think that it's just a foregone conclusion that Burney's going to be a lock to make this roster. He needs to go out there, he needs to do it at a solid rate, and he needs to hope that this team keeps 5 linebackers. Let's go to number 9 here on our players that need to have a great training camp, or else. It's Anthony Brown at the quarterback position, and Anthony Brown's going to be battling with Carter Bradley. I didn't really put any of the rookies or younger players on this list. It was more of, the veterans that have already made this team here at least once or twice. He was on the practice squad last season, and this is going to be a Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew. This is where a lot of that concentration, a lot of the energy around the quarterback battle is going to be focused on. But then at the same time, we also are kind of blessed that we have another quarterback battle going down between the UDFA Bradley and Anthony Brown. And I've said before that I think Bradley's the better fit with the Luke Getsy offense, the better comp with the Minshew and O'Connell, where Brown was a player that did hang around a little bit. The Raiders, Antonio Pierce, it's been noted that they do like his athletic ability because it gives you at least something a little bit different to look at practice. But I'll tell you this, he's in a hell of a battle, and he needs to be able to go out there and step up. My question to the nation, and this is the question that I would really like for every single person that watches today's show to please answer, which position group interests you the most for training camp? And my answer is going to be after this YouTube ad break. So for those of you that are about to get hit, scroll on down, give me your answer because mine's coming up after this break. The position group that I'm looking forward to the most is quarterback. And it's kind of the boring answer, so I'll also say cornerback, where I want to see between Brandon Face and Ja'Cory Bennett which player steps up. Which of these other lower-level roster guys are going to be battling, kind of pushing that cornerback group up a little bit, and then the defensive line. For our Raiders defense to take the step that all of us are hoping, you need players like Tyree Wilson to take that next step, Byron Young to be able to take that next step. Hell, a Nesta Jade Severa, maybe a Matthew Butler. All those players need to step up, and I think you're going to hear some of those names pop up here in a little bit. Let's go to number 8. I'm going to go with Zach Gentry, and this might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. He's the tight end 4 right now, but the reason why I do find him intriguing is because he's 6'8", and he's technically the tallest player that we have on our team. Him and Colt Miller are the only guys that are legitimately 6'8", But with the 12 personnel, the Raiders want to use a lot of tight ends, and we know that Harrison Bryant, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, those are going to be your top 3 tight ends. But then there's also that part of me where I know the Raiders want to be able to execute better in the red zone. And it wouldn't shock me if the Raiders, especially if they had an injury pop up, you see Gentry get used a little bit more in that red zone. I think that there's a chance that he makes this team, and if he goes out there and he's able to perform, he's able to do a lot of things, can show that he can block and really be that safety blanket, especially in this inside the 20. Gentry is a player to keep an eye on during training camp. Let's go to number 7 here. It's Chris Smith at safety. Kind of like what I said about Amari Burney, Smith falls into the exact same category where I think Burney's a good player. I think Chris Smith is a good player, but this is the old regime. McDaniels and Ziegler, drafted in the 5th round last season out of Georgia, was a good leader on that Georgia Bulldog defense, but the problem is there's a lot of talent at safety, and I think sneakily safety is one of those position groups for the Raiders that they have a lot more talent than what a lot of people want to admit. I think Epps and Merrick make one of the better safety duos in the NFL. I'll even say it's the most underrated safety duo in the entire league. But then you also got a guy like Isaiah Palameo, who this organization loves a lot. Then you also got a guy in Trey Taylor, who they drafted in the 7th round, which kind of puts the Smith character here in a difficult situation because, to me, he's the safety number 5. And the reason why Smith also needs to continue to go out there and do his thing is because where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's been a lot of smoke growing around Jaden Grant, who was a UDFA last year out of Oregon State. Max Crosby gave him a birthday shout-out when interviewing Trey Taylor. I believe it was Trey Taylor or it was Dylan Laube. Graphic asked him, who's another player that's really stuck out to you? It was Trey Taylor. Taylor said Jaden Grant. Now, maybe it's because, he's been working with him a little bit, but it's not the first time that somebody has said, hey, watch out for this Jaden Grant guy, and I do think it's just another reason why Smith's got to go out there and do his thing. Coming in here at number 6, it's running back Ameer Abdullah, and we've talked about this one a lot. He's going to be battling with Dylan Laube. He's going to be fighting for some extra opportunities. But then also with these new kickoff return rules, I do think that was the initial reason why the Raiders decided to bring back Abdullah. And something that we've talked about on this show and, things that I've talked about from players is the new kickoff return rules are a lot closer to like running the football compared to, the old special teams, the way that we would look at it. And if Abdullah can't prove that he's the best return man, or if he's got an ability to at least give you a little bit on 3rd down, I think that this might be a year that, he might not make that 53-man. Zamir White's a lock. Alexander Madison, he's going to end up making this roster too. They added him to this team because of the wide zone running scheme. But for Ameer Abdullah, I thought he was brought to the Raiders originally because of Kennedy Palomalu, the Vikings running back coach, which could be another reason why Madison decided to come in. He's no longer the running back coach anymore. We got Cadillac Williams. But if Laube continues to go out there and continues to impress the way that he's been impressing, Ameer might be one of the odd men out. So before we continue to break down the top 5 players that I just think have the most, and I mean the most to prove, the most to just go out there and do their thing during training camp so they don't get cut, we'll get into that here in just a moment. But please, I want you to put this into your calendar, Saturday, July 20th at 1 p.m. I want to hang out with some of the people here from the nation. We film everything that we do here in Dallas, Texas. This location is, it's kind of close to where Chugs and I work, and if you've never been to a Matitos, it's good Mexican food. Tex-Mex is kind of how I would put it. But the owner here is a diehard Raider fan, and he said he would hook up the nation. So I'll be there on Saturday for a few hours. If you're like, man, I can't get there at 1 o'clock, all good. I'm sure we'll be there hanging out, having some food, having some drinks. If you want to bring some friends, hey, more the merrier. If you want to bring your kids, it's totally fine to be able to do that. It's a kid-safe spot. So please put this in there. Hope to see you there this Saturday, July 20th. Let's party it up, nation. Let's go to number 5 here on the list. It's Dalton Wagner. And the next 5 players that I have here, I kind of felt like, man, I think I almost should have ranked them a little bit higher. And Wagner is one of these players that I do really want him to make the team because he was a player that I liked. UDFA from Arkansas last season, got put on the IR, and it's just been a dude that has kind of hung around on this team. And speaking to some of the Raiders players that I have, there's a lot of leaders on the team that really like Dalton Wagner. And, for example, and this is just an example, I'm not saying that Robert Spillane told me anything, but when Robert Spillane had his baby, right, the Spillane family, they had a baby, I want to say about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago. One of the people that showed up at the hospital holding Spillane's baby was Dalton Wagner. And to me, Spillane's one of the leaders. He's a captain. And I don't think that would just be an open invitation to every single teammate on the team. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. but I have actually heard from a lot of players that are very prominent players on this team that they really, really like Dalton Wagner, and he's a solid guy. And because of this Raiders offensive line group, like I like Andres Pete. I think Whitehair is going to end up making this team. Glaze is going to make it. To me, he's really going to have to battle it out with somebody like a Jordan Meredith, a player maybe like a Johanning, who the Raiders like a lot. If the Raiders keep 10 offensive linemen, I think Wagner's got a shot. If they only decide to keep 8 or 9, that's where you might be on the odd man looking out. Let's go to number 4 here. It's Cornell Armstrong. And I don't think that a lot of people anticipate that Armstrong is going to end up making this roster. The only reason why I'll say let's not totally write him off is because he is a long and lanky corner. And if there's been one thing that the Raiders have kind of showed us this offseason of what they're kind of looking for in a corner, it's this long, lanky, and athletic guy. Armstrong was on the Raiders practice squad last season, and he was signed when Antonio Pierce took over. So this is obviously a player that, AP or maybe this new regime has at least just decided to keep around a little bit longer. But because the new kickoff return rules, Tom McMahon, the Raiders special teams coach, one of the things that he said was like that they're really, really like looking for more of these long, lanky, athletic corners to be able to use on special teams. So everything I said about Amari Burney, everything I said about Ameer Abdullah, to me, Armstrong's not really going to make an impact on defense. That's going to be Jacorian Bennett, Brandon Faison, DeCamerion Richardson, MJ Devonshire. Like, those are going to be your corners, Nate Hobbs, Jack Jones. But for a guy like Armstrong, can he make this team by figuring out a way to just be that extra depth and maybe helping out a little bit more on special teams? Because when you really go from top to bottom on that 53-man and keeping 7 corners does seem like a little bit of a stretch, no doubt about it. But again, could the Raiders decide to do some things that they haven't done just because they're a little bit unsure about what those kick return rules end up looking like? Before I get into the top players here who I just think need to go out there and need to show what they need to do at training camp so they don't get cut, I want you to let me know one player who you think needs to have a solid camp right now to make the team. So this player needs to be somebody where if I go, is that person making it? You go, no. But if they have a solid camp, then they're going to make the team. That's the player I want you to think about. Let me know who you're thinking of down below. Because for me, one of the players that I could absolutely put on that list is this guy right here. And it's Janarius Robinson. And unfortunately, Robinson, he signed that 1-year, $965,000 contract this offseason. Got himself into a little bit of trouble. And I stepped up here on this show and I said I would have cut him. The fact that the Raiders haven't done that yet, to me, says that this is a player that they are actually hoping makes the 53-man. This is a player that they're hoping steps up, and he did step up at the end of last season. We talked so much about Malcolm Kuhn because, Malcolm had 8 sacks in the final 9 games for AP. The lesser version of a defensive end that really stepped up and played much better than what we expected after AP took over was Janarius Robinson, and they rewarded him pretty quickly afterward. And I think at defensive end, we have a lot of top talent. I got a lot of confidence in Max Crosby. I got a lot of confidence in Malcolm Kuntz. My hopes are extremely high for Tyree Wilson. But then after that, it's a lot of unknowns. It's a lot of question marks. And this team needs to be able to keep 4 defensive ends. Unless they plan on signing Emmanuel Ogba or somebody that can help at edge, Janarius Robinson's going to need to make an impact. But Robinson still needs to go out there and show his thing, because if he doesn't show that he's able to do it at a high level, I'm the Raiders. I go, man, our defensive end depth is even more or less than what I thought. If Janarius goes out there and does his thing, I don't think that they're going to sign an edge. If Janarius doesn't show up, that's where I think you could see a situation where the Raiders go, Yannick Ngakoue, are you available? Emmanuel Ogba, are you available? We need another defensive end to be able to fill in here for this defensive line. Let's go to number 2 on the list. It's DJ Turner, and Raiders special teams coach Tom McMahon this offseason said that he, quote, loves Turner. And Turner's been a player that, you got to give him a lot of credit. He's been able to just keep his spot on some rosters and was a UDFA at a Pitt back in 2022, a player that I didn't really think was going to be able to hang around the NFL for all that long. But what does he do? He just keeps on figuring out a way to do it, and he does it on special teams. The name that I'm going to throw out here, they don't play a similar position, but the way that I look at DJ Turner is kind of the same way that I look at Dalen Levitt, where Levitt a few years ago back in the Oakland Raiders days was a safety that you're like, he's not that good of a safety, but he just good special teams player. And I think for a lot of NFL teams, that's a very important thing, because you got to be good on offense, you got to be good on defense, but you also got to be good on special teams. And for Turner, he's not really going to see a lot of work at receiver. However, though, could he find himself on the field in these kick return situations, on these punt return situations? I will admit, he made me pretty damn nervous last year as a punt returner, dropped a few, he's muffed a few in the past as well, but can he get better this year? And with these new kickoff return rules, does he have the ability to make the team? He needs to show it as a receiver, needs to be able to show it in special teams. But the player to me that it's the most important for him to show up and prove that he deserves a spot on this roster, it's defensive tackle Matthew Butler. And I could have probably even put Nesta Jade Silvera on this list, but I do think that if the season were to start today, who makes it, Matthew Butler or Nesta Jade? I'm going to say Nesta Jade makes it over Butler just because of the relationship that Jade has with Antonio Pierce from his previous days from Arizona State. And then also think about everything that the Raiders did at defensive tackle. Christian Wilkins, Adam Butler, John Jenkins. This team also is really hoping that Byron Young takes a step forward. Because, if I'm Tom Telesco and I'm going, all right, so you're telling me we drafted 2 defensive tackles from 2022, a guy in the 3rd round, a guy in the 5th round. No disrespect to Matthew Butler, I'm going to pay a little bit closer attention to Byron Young, and that's going to be the hope that that guy is able to step up. Because to me, this team is going to keep 5, they might keep 6 DTs. And depending on what you think of Tyree Wilson, I've seen Tyree Wilson. He looks like he's bulking up, and he looks a lot closer to being a defensive tackle than he does an edge rusher. So with that being said, then what do they decide to do? Because if you decide to keep the 4 players that are pictured, Byron Young, that means Matthew Butler is going to be battling with a lot of other defensive tackles, and quite frankly, I don't know if he has the juice to be able to get the job done. So one more time here are our top 10 players that are on the roster bubble that need to have solid training camps, or else I don't know if they're going to end up making the 53-man roster. If you guys want to take a screenshot of this and post it on IG, post it on Twitter, all I ever ask is that you do tag me. Believe it or not, it does help. The way that this show grows is, I do have to make videos every day. That helps it grow. Another way that helps Chugs and I out is when you share our content on Twitter, on IG, when you tag us, when you do all that stuff, because there's a lot of people that have never heard of this show. I know, you guys watch it a lot, but there's a lot of people out there that haven't, and I would greatly appreciate it if you did.